Hello students, welcome to underground METALIFERROUS mining classes. From this unit 1, we are going to learn about different explosives and their initiating devices. In the second session of today, we are going to cover the properties of explosives and the permitted and non-permitted explosives. In case today in our class we are going to learn about what are the properties of explosives. The properties of explosives could be the density of an explosive, sensitivity of explosive, strength of an explosive, velocity of detonation, and its water resistance. And now let's start with the density of an explosive. The density of an explosive is the very important property of an explosive. The reason is, the first, if the density of explosive is less than 1, then such explosive could not be used in the blast hole which has water in it, or we could say the explosive with specific gravity is less than 1 will float on the water, right? Since the density of water is 1. In that case, such explosive could not be permitted in the holes, the blast holes which has water in it. In that case, the density could become the prime most important in choosing an explosive. And second, an explosive which has the high density could settle at the bottom of a blast hole. The density of an explosive is directly proportional to the strength of the explosive. Here, if the density of an explosive is less, then we could say the explosive is equally distributed in the blast hole. If it is high, then that particular explosive is dominated at the bottommost part of the hole. This is the reason where we say the density property of an explosive is prime most important in choosing of an explosive based on the different criteria or utilization. The next, the strength of an explosive. Strength of an explosive, it somewhere related to velocity of detonation of an explosive. But here, if the velocity of a detonation, here it could be divided into two types. One, if the velocity of detonation is less than the velocity of the sound, then it becomes subsonic. If the velocity of detonation is more than the sound, it becomes a supersonic. Here, the low explosives, we know that low explosive has less strength. But in technical terms, when we call the low explosive, its velocity of detonations will be less than the sound. That in technical word we call it as subsonic. In case of high explosives, such high explosives, velocity of detonations will be higher than the sound, velocity of sound. In such cases, that becomes supersonic. Here, the strength of an explosive, as I said, during the blasting, initially it raises the velocity detonates. During detonation, it gets VOD is one. Second thing, gas, the release from explosives, and the rise in temperature, and this gas at high pressure because of its confinement. The release of such gases in the confinement and the velocity of detonations together forms the strength. The next property, velocity of detonations. This is, in a simple word, we could say the shock wave traveling in the medium at different velocity, which we could call as velocity of detonation. There are two types of such waves, like the wave passing through the rock, the wave passing through the explosive column. Here we are confined to the wave passing through the medium during an explosion. Such velocity of detonations could give us the precise strength of an explosive. The next, the water resistance property of an explosive. Here we knew the explosives which can absorb water could fail to explode. Such cases, there could be loss of explosives, there could be misfire. For such cases, the explosive should be water resistance, which explosive should not be affected by the direct contact of water, though they are immersed for the long time. Such explosives are called water resistant explosives. These are the very prime property of an explosive. The sensitivity. In case of sensitivity, we usually be sensitive in our daily life. We may see some jokes, we may laugh, cry, or be angry. The similar type, when we speak about an explosive sensitivity, it could be the impact sensitivity, the friction sensitivity, electrostatic discharge sensitivity, flame sensitivity. Here, during certain impacts, the explosive may initiate. Here, we should know the subdivisions of sensitivity in explosives. They are subdivided into two types, that are cap sensitive explosives and non-cap sensitive explosives. The cap sensitive explosives, which could be detonated by number 8 detonator, means it requires a smaller detonations. Such detonations can initiate an explosion, whereas non-cap sensitive explosives, it requires a primer or a booster to initiate its explosion. Now we have seen what are the two subdivisions in the sensitivity of explosive. Now let's know what are the different sensitivity we could deal. The impact sensitivity. If there is any impact on an explosive, such impact should not initiate an explosive. If there is a friction, at the same time the electrostatic discharge, if any stray current, should not initiate an explosive. That becomes the sensitivity. If it could initiate, it means the explosive is more sensitive to this electric discharge or a flame or friction or impact. We could say the explosives is more sensitive or less sensitive to this causes. Let's see a video on the same.
It's really important to understand why explosives are sensitive and to try and predict which explosives are going to be sensitive. We wanted to take a series of molecules that are very similar to a common initiating explosive, PETN, or pentaerythritol tetranitrate. Take those explosives and tweak them just slightly and see if we could influence their sensitivity properties. Explosive sensitivity basically means how easily that explosive will initiate if you apply some sort of impulse to it. But understanding explosive sensitivity is extremely important because it can help us prevent accidents and build better and safer explosives for the future. It's also interesting from a scientific point of view to understand what features of explosives are going to lead to some being more sensitive to stimulus than others. Through experiments, we were able to tune these molecules, and we could see what the sensitivity properties were. We could also see how those molecules pack together in a solid. Because we combined experiments and modeling together, we're finally able to separate the underlying chemistry behind what's going on in these molecules, which is driving the main sensitivity behavior. Coming up with an idea, testing that idea both experimentally and with modeling, and then realizing that we were all a little bit wrong and kind of coming to the same conclusion together. It was a lot of fun. And sometimes it's just fun to create a story that has never been created before, that nobody's ever thought about or seen before.
Next property of an explosive could be a oxygen balance. Explosives usually are confined in the short holes, where we have seen a fire to burn requires three important natural things like the igniter, the combustible material, and the oxygen. Now, for this explosion to happen, it requires oxygen. The lack of oxygen in the short holes could lead to the misfire in the hole. Such may deter a great loss to the owner. In such cases, we insert certain oxidizing agents in the explosives or add certain oxidizing agents in the explosives, which could supply sufficient oxygen so that there is a complete combustion to the combustible compounds used in the explosives. On complete combustion, the strong explosion wave will be developed to do a useful work. The amount of harmful gases given by the explosives will be reduced if the detonation is complete. If the detonation needs to be complete, it requires sufficient oxygen to be present. Now, let's see the properties of different explosive materials. Now, let's go to our next topic, that are the permitted and non-permitted explosives. First, let's deal with what are the permitted explosives. These are the explosives which are included in the official list of authorized explosives issued by the Chief Controller of Explosives in India, may be used for blasting in mines. Only on passing the test in explosive approved as permitted explosives. There are 5 permitted explosives. Among them, the 3 types of permitted explosives are used in India. Each group of permitted explosives being designated for particular operations to give a maximum safety. Now, to know what exactly is a permitted explosives. Such permitted explosives are used in coal mines to avoid the fire outbreak due to the blast happening. Such permitted explosives has a sheath or a flame depressant which could seal off the fire within the confined space such that this flame shall not ignite the methane present in the mines or other coal present in the coal mines. Now, let's see this video. Can you see a fire arising out of this explosion? And such fire, if it takes place in the place where inflammable gases such as methane or the coal present in coal mines could lead to a disaster for the entire mines and loss of men and machinery for the entire mines. For such cases, we go with permitted explosives so that the flame shall be confined to the local place or the local area where it could be at short time depressed by a flame depressant. Now we could see what are the types of permitted explosives and their use. The type 1 that we call P1 permitted explosives, which are unsheathed explosives. These explosives can be used for drifting or ripping and simultaneous firing in an undercut or overcut and in depulring phases in coal seams of first degree gasiness. And P2 explosives, these are sheathed explosives. This type of explosives are not used in India. The P3 type of explosives are equivalent to sheathed explosives used for drifting or ripping and simultaneous firing in an undercut, middle cut, or overcut and in depulring phases here it is second and third degree gassy coal mines. P4 type permitted explosives. These are sheathed explosives. These explosives are not used in India. B4 type of explosives are used for solid blasting or P4 types of explosives are used for special purpose for giving more safety to the blasting. Such special purpose of explosives are not used in India at present. The P5 type permitted explosive, these are special types of explosive with an higher degree of intrinsic safety against all type of likely hazards in delay blasting and specially designed for solid blasting. The non-permitted explosive for certain operations such as shaft sinking, stone drifting, where there is no gas or a coal dust present, or explosives other than permitted explosives can be used, subject to such condition as may laid down by the DGMS in specific instance. Now, let's see a video entering India coal mines, how a blasting operations takes place.
काफी मतलब खराब है तो इसकी तो सेम नहीं इस तरह काम करना सीधी से जब भी काम करते हैं इसको पहले काफी करते हैं जब भी बहुत अच्छे से सपोर्ट करते हैं ये देखिए आप मतलब सपोर्ट किया हुआ था लेकिन जब बंद हो गया तो अपने आप तो गिर टूट के गिर गया नीचे फिर दोबारा इसको सफाई किया गया है और साइड साइड से सपोर्ट करके ड्रेसिंग ये आगे इसके साथ
Muito possível.
कैप्सूल होता है ये हम लोग का मतलब स्पेशल डीजीएमएस से परमिशन दे करके परमिटेड काइंड ऑफ कैप्सूल होता है इसका बहुत सारा टाइप होता है P3 होता है P5 होता है तो वो माइस का कैसा गैसियस है उस हिसाब से हम उसको सेलेक्ट करते हैं ये हमारा जो है चार्ज करने की तो जब हम उसको एक्सप्लोडर से कनेक्ट करते हैं और इसमें करंट पावर उस पार करेंगे ये हमारा ब्लास्ट होगा थोड़ा सा ये जो सॉफ्टवेयर क्रिएट करेगा इसके थ्रू हमारा जो है बाकी कैप्सूल जो है ब्लास्ट करेगा इसमें जो आपका जो डेटोनेटर होता है ये भी मतलब डीले डेटोनेटर होता है कि आप जब उसको स्पार्क देंगे तो एक पार्ट ऑफ मतलब फ्रैक्शन ऑफ सेकेंड कितना डीले के बाद ब्लास्ट करेगा एक करने के बाद थोड़ा फ्रैक्शन ऑफ सेकंड और दूसरा भी फ्रैक्शन ऑफ सेकंड के बाद तीसरा पता नहीं चलेगा जब ब्लास्टिंग होगा लेकिन इतना होता है
ब्लास्ट कर दिया गया और उसके बाद के एक्सप्लोरर में केबल जोड़ेंगे उसके बाद थोड़ा उनके साथ पकाएंगे उसके बाद आवाज करेंगे खबरदार है खबरदार कोई ना से खबरदार
Now, let's see the MCQs. The first MCQ, the amount of energy released by an explosive during the blasting is called strength of an explosive. The rate at which the detonation wave passes through the column of explosive is called velocity of detonation. Next, the shattering effect is obtained with the explosives having higher velocity of detonation. The hazard performance initiation propagation are related to one of the characteristics of an explosive. Sensitivity of an explosive. The important characteristics of an explosive which will give an idea about heat and humid conditions and time of exposure is stability of an explosive. Now we have seen the velocity of detonation of ANFO is 3200 meter per second. The reducing agent in slurry explosives is trinitrotoluene, that is TNT. The gelling agent in slurry explosives is starch. At least how much percentage the packed explosives are less effective than bulk explosives? It is 15%. The sensitizers in emulsion explosives is microspheres. What are microspheres? Microspheres are the micro air present in the emulsion explosives that becomes a sensitizer in an emulsion explosive. The velocity of detonations of emulsion explosives is 5 kilometers per second. Velocity of detonation of slurry explosives is 3.3 kilometers per second. With permitted explosives, the duration of flame is 1/1000 sheath explosives coated with a sheath of NaHCO3. In the detonator, the priming charge is, the detonator has two charges, that is prime charge as well as base charge. Prime charge is ASA, lead acid, lead stephanite and aluminium powder, whereas the base charge is PETN, pentaerythritol tetranitrate. The permitted explosives used in underground in viewers of all gassing mines, that is solid blasting, that is solid jacks. Thank you.